The release of Marvel's first movie Iron Man 1 in 2008 completely turned around Marvel, which was on the brink of bankruptcy. The phrase "I'm Iron Man" opened a glorious chapter for Marvel's next success. So today, let's look back at this legendary movie that saved Marvel. Tony Stark, the son of legendary weapons developer Howard Stark, showed extraordinary talent from an early age. He built his first circuit board at the age of 4 and built his own V8 engine at the age of 6. He graduated with honors from MIT at the age of 17. Pay attention to this paragraph. The newspaper said that Tony discovered that artificial intelligence can be programmed to implant personalities. He is currently perfecting 2 robot prototypes. The 2 robots will obey his commands and learn from his actions. This is the newspaper from when Tony was 16 years old. The newspaper talks about robot prototypes, which means that these 2 robots are not ready yet. So what are these 2 robots? Exactly, they are Jarvis and Ultron, or Jarvis and the predecessor of Ultron. Tony took over Stark Industries after his father's death and developed it into the world's leading weapons developer. Tony is a playboy on the plane, eating and having fun all day. Every morning when he wakes up, there is always a different woman next to him. Fortunately, he also has a dedicated assistant, Pepper Potts, to help him deal with these things. On that day, he was supposed to take a flight to Afghanistan, but he was still tinkering with his car at home. When he drove to the airport, the flight to Afghanistan was 3 hours late. Arriving in Afghanistan, Tony demonstrated the latest super weapon to the local army. This demonstration made the army very satisfied. However, on the way back, his convoy was suddenly attacked by a terrorist group. All the soldiers who accompanied him were killed, and Tony quickly ran behind a rock and was about to call for help when a homemade rocket fell next to him. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a dark cave and had a strange device on his chest. This was what the man in front of him had done. He used an electromagnet to absorb the shrapnel in Tony's body and saved his life. The person who attached this device to him was Insan, a scientist who was also kidnapped. At this time, a group of terrorists also entered the door. They presented the blueprint and hoped that Tony could help them build a rocket. Tony refused on the spot and was tortured by the other side. In order to save his life, he pretended to agree, but he already had an escape plan in mind. First, he extracted materials from the rockets and made a small arc reactor to replace the electromagnet in his chest. Then he wanted to make an indestructible steel armor. In the next few days, the two completed some parts of the armor. When Tony was debugging these parts, the terrorists rushed in and asked Tony why. Dr. Insen quickly explained that these were missile parts, but the terrorists did not believe him, immediately saying that they would kill Dr. Insen. Tony immediately intervened, saying that if Insen died, he could not make the missile either. Finally, the terrorists gave him 1 more day to finish the job, otherwise they would both be killed. Tony started working hard all night, and after a whole night of forging steel armor, Mark 1 was finally completed. The leader found them disappearing on the camera and sent his subordinates to check, but Tony had already prepared a bomb on the door as soon as they opened the door. The boss woke up and ordered all his men to attack Tony and Insen. Tony still needs a procedure to activate the armor. To buy time, Insen picks up the gun and rushes out. Note that he doesn't kill anyone but just shoots randomly to make the enemy panic. Here we can see that Dr. Insen holding the gun doesn't kill anyone but randomly shoots at other places. This is the kindness in Dr. Insen's subconscious mind. He just wants to buy more time for Tony. He won't kill innocent people like these terrorists. It is this kindness that makes Tony later become Iron Man to maintain peace later. At this time, the armor system has finished booting up. Iron Man Mark 1 appears in the invulnerable armor. The terrorists are like pieces of paper in front of him. The terrorists ran away after seeing this steel monster. After killing all the enemies in the cave, Tony realized that Insen had been killed by the terrorists. Tony was so angry that he walked out of the cave and fired countless bullets at Tony, but the bullets did not affect the armor. Tony easily defeated the terrorists, burned down their arsenal, and then a violent explosion occurred. Tony flew away, but soon ran out of fuel and fell heavily in the desert. Fortunately, his life was not serious. Tony realized that instead of protecting people, weapons had become the fuse for war, which also went against his original desire for peace. So at the press conference he made a shocking decision, which was to completely shut down Stark Industries' weapons projects. As soon as his words were made, It attracted widespread attention from all walks of life, the company's major shareholders. Ironmonger asked him if he was an idiot. He asked Tony to think carefully about his decision, but Tony said that he had already decided. Then Tony built a new reactor and asked his assistant Pepper to replace it. Pepper asked what to do with the old reactor. Tony asked her to destroy it directly. But Pepper did not do that, but instead kept it as a souvenir of Tony's regeneration. After countless tests, it was this action that saved Tony's life. The function of each part of the armor was finally okay. Then the Mark II armor was assembled and ready. After everything was ready, the new armor officially took off. There is a small detail here. When Tony was testing the Mark II, because he had not forgotten about the armor, Tony almost crashed into the wall. If you observe closely, you will see that the artificial intelligence Jarvis actually warned Tony that he was going to crash into the wall. Tony then flew up into the sky excitedly, but when he reached 40,000 feet, the armor shell began to freeze, and when the system malfunctioned when falling from high altitude, Tony turned on the defrosting system, which saved the success of developing this armor, and was also the happiest moment of his life. After that, Tony made up for the defects in the armor's material and redesigned the color of the armor. Meanwhile, the debris of the Mark I that Tony abandoned in the desert was discovered by terrorists and brought back for research. Tony learned from a reporter while attending a party. I received news from a friend that someone was secretly making arms deals with terrorists. Only then did Tony learn that there was an insider in the company. He immediately went to Obadiah Stane. He simply confessed everything and said that he did this to protect Tony. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, he decided to put on the armor to fight for justice. When Tony put on the steel armor, no Marvel fan can help but shiver at this Iron Man transformation. Afghanistan continued to commit brutal crimes, but wearing the armor, Tony also fell from the sky and easily dealt with a few thugs. Facing the thugs holding hostages, Tony also secretly aimed at the target. Even the man hiding behind the wall was pulled out by Tony. Then, Tony shot a laser and destroyed the enemy's weapons. When he returned home, he was considered a UFO when passing through military airspace. Or was it Tony's attack? He called Rhodes to explain the situation and then returned home safely. That night, Obadiah Stane went to the terrorist camp, planned to kidnap Tony. This time he arrived and discovered that the group had obtained Tony's secret weapon, Mark I. The terrorist leader wanted to cooperate with Obadiah Stane and let him mass-produce this type of armor. However, the terrorists had no use for it at the moment. While investigating the spy, Pepper also learned the truth while copying the information. At this time, Obadiah Stane had just arrived at the office and could only pretend to be calm and quietly pull out the USB drive and leave. Stane also quickly turned on the computer to check the situation and discovered the secret. So he wanted to catch up with Pepper but unexpectedly met Agent Phil Coulson, so he didn't dare to do anything to Pepper. After Stane learned of the secret leak, he quickly went to the scientists and asked them to speed up the production of the reactor. This scientist seemed familiar to everyone. That's right, he resigned and went to find a new job with Mysterio. Iron Overlord thought that since he couldn't build it himself, he would have to steal it, so he used black technology to paralyze Tony. Iron Overlord dug up the reactor on his chest and said that this was Tony's ninth symphony because the number 9 is often considered a meaning of perfection and completeness in Western culture. For example, in Christianity, the number 9 is considered the Father, the Holy Trinity, and there is a strange legend about the Ninth Symphony, which is that many famous classical music masters died after composing the Ninth Symphony. So the Ninth Symphony is also called the Death Symphony. Yes, that's even more subtle. Avengers 4, where Iron Man sacrifices his life, happens to be the 9th Marvel movie that Robert Downey Jr. officially starred in. Iron Man's use of the Ninth Symphony here means that Tony is dying of heart failure, but as mentioned above, Peppers kept Tony's first reactor. Thus she saved Tony's life. After getting the reactor, Stane was eager to put it into the modified Mark I. At the same time, Pepper also led some SILD agents to capture Stane. Pepper, who was being chased by Ironmonger, escaped and quickly called Tony for help at the crucial moment when Ironmonger was about to make a move. Tony arrived in time after the two talked. Knew that it was not so. The opponent modified the armor, then planned to use strategy to win. Knowing that he couldn't win by force, Tony lured Stane into the air, Ironmonger's armor was also frozen due to the defect of the energy material that was about to run out, and he stumbled back to the ground. But what Tony didn't expect was that after this, Ironmonger still didn't die. Tony was almost crushed by Iron Overlord, and he was the one who used a firebomb to free him. Tony told Pepper to go to the control room and turn on all the power. He intended to die with his opponent, although Pepper didn't want to give up, but at this time there was only one way, so he pressed the button and immediately a powerful electric current shot into the sky. In the end, Ironmonger and his armor fell into the reactor and were blown to ashes. Tony was lucky to survive in the press conference after the accident. Then in the press conference the others had prepared a set of lines for him. All he had to do was read from the script, and he said he was Iron Man.
I am Iron Man,
he said in front of many media. The explosive news of the timeless classic not only excited reporters across the city, but also attracted the attention of more mysterious organizations. After Tony returned home, he discovered that Nick Fury had been waiting for him all along, which also set the stage for the later building of the Avengers Alliance, laying the foundation for changing the Marvel Universe forever.